Hi, everyone. Welcome to another KE Report webinar, also presented by Focus Communications. In this webinar, we are getting an update from FireFox Gold, traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol FFOX, and on the OTCQB under the symbol FFOXF. I am your host, Cory Fleck, also the host of the KE Report. And if any of you, I just want to note, have questions after this webinar, even during this webinar, you can always email me your questions at fleck@kereport.com. We also have a function within this webinar platform for you to ask questions. All of those are going to come through me. I'm going to do my best to get to all the questions that have already been sent in and those that get generated through this webinar. I'll be interjecting those throughout the presentation. If we don't get to all your questions, it's more time permitting. Then I will be having FireFox Gold back on my show for an update and also to do more of a rapid fire presentation to cover off those questions. Now, representing FireFox, we have the chairman, Patrick Highsmith, and the CEO, Carl Löfberg. Just to bring everybody up to speed, FireFox Gold is focused in Finland. The company has a large portfolio of projects and 4 prospects that are drill ready that I believe have plans to be drilled here in the near term, already with drills turning on one of these prospects. Patrick, let me just send it over to you first. Before we get into this presentation, please just give everybody who's tuning in a bit of a background on what we are going to be focusing on here for this webinar for FireFox Gold.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Cory. It's good to be here. We're going to discuss really a synopsis of FireFox as a company and our projects. And with Carl and I both here, we'll spend a fair bit of time on the technical aspects of our portfolio of projects. We'll particularly highlight the recent drilling of high-grade gold at Mustajärvi. And as you suggested, Cory, there are 3 more drill-ready prospects coming down the conveyor belt, and we'll sort of outline those as well.
All right, guys, here we go. I'm going to fire up the presentation. And from there, I'll let you guys dictate where we go. But again, everyone send in your questions. There is that chat function within this program, and we will address as many of those as possible. Patrick, Carl, take us away, guys.
Thank you very much. So we'll begin through the presentation here. Of course, there's a lot of technical information here. There are forward-looking statements, quality assurance information that you should make yourself aware of here and on our website. Thanks very much for your attention to that. There is a new gold rush in Lapland. Many of you have heard about that, I'm sure, and FireFox is a major player. We've been there a long time. Carl is based in Finland. Our technical team is substantially based in Finland. So we're right in our backyard. We have moved rapidly. We have built a huge land position, about 800 square kilometers in this newly emerging greenstone belt. A lot of activity there. Even today, Rupert Resources has announced their maiden resource at the Ikkari discovery, and our team has proven itself capable. We're very execution-oriented. We've got a lot of gray hair, which means a lot of experience as well, plus a young, vibrant team in the field. So we'll take you through a little bit, and here you see some of the sort of essentials that you need to see in a junior company, a little bit about our share structure. At the bottom of the slide, we have about 100 million shares outstanding. The company was actually founded in 2017, and we IPO'd on the TSXV late in 2018. We began at that time with a great array of shareholders, a substantial amount of shareholding at the board level, but several institutional investors as well. And in the lower right, you can sort of get a feel for our largest shareholders, Crescat Capital, SSI Asset Management out of Zurich, and Mike Gentile as far as outside investors, and Carl and his private company, Magnus Minerals, and myself, also substantial shareholders, as you can see here in the lower left. So institutional shareholders, a couple of corporate groups, no major gold companies, none of the corporate strategic investors you sometimes see in these companies. And here in the lower left, an interesting comparison. There are 4 junior companies and 2 majors that control the Central Lapland Greenstone Belt. Not the dozen or 2 dozen that you might see in some greenstone belts around the world. And with Rupert's news of the Ikkari discovery, you can see they're really at a post-discovery valuation, trading like a company that's found a multi-million ounce gold deposit. In the case of FireFox Gold and S2 Resources and Orion Resources, as the other major players, explorers in the Lapland Belt, you can see substantially trading at pre-discovery valuation. Carl, any more comments about that slide before we move on?
No, I think that we can move along.
Couple quick questions then here, guys. In terms of cash in the bank, where does the company stand?
Carl, you want to answer that?
2.9 million.
Okay, thank you. And then when it comes to the division here between retail and let's call them more institutional owners, retail ownership, about 30%, excuse me, guys. And the institutional ownership, it's a large institutional or at least larger shareholders within this company. Company IPO'd back in 2018, the end of 2018. How did you get so many institutions and large shareholders in the door so quickly?
Well, you know, Cory, initially, when we were talking about this emerging greenstone belt, there was already traction there. Orion had made their high-profile boulder discovery, which has led to drilling and some gold in the ground as well. So it was a timely, really float for us, and on the private side and later on the IPO as well, Cory. But frankly, we've done our financing non-brokered. We've built relationships with these teams and spent a lot of time with analysts and buy-side folks. And it's just sort of evolved naturally because it's a long-term view to do greenfields exploration. And teams like these investors we've listed here and others, I think they're looking for big discoveries, Cory, and they know that underexplored belts like this are a good way to get exposure to that.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, let's move on. Thank you.
So just very quickly here to sum up the team, our board is very small. There you see Carl and myself. Carl, business trained and economist. I'm technically trained and more lately on the business side of things. And then two fully independent directors, Joe Mullen and Timo Maki, one in North America, one in Finland there. Our Vancouver office is our CFO, Janice Craig, in the lower left. And on the right, you see some of the key technical players. Sven Honig out of Czech is our general manager of exploration. He's running things on the ground. And he's recently brought in all that structural geology that you've seen us talking about in our news releases, essential at the Mustajärvi discovery, as a matter of fact. And Mikko Neninen, we can't say enough about Mikko, a comparatively young guy, but he's worked at Agnico Eagle, the only big miner so far in Lapland of gold, and managing the projects on the ground, building relationships with surface landowners, contractors, and regulators. He's been a superstar, and he built a house in the Arctic, so he's close to our projects. And then also, I just want to mention Dr. Rich Goldfarb, often known as the sort of father of orogenic gold deposits. He's published well over 300 papers on the subject. And really, Rich has been with us since the beginning. And so it's this team that gets together by Zoom or in person whenever we can to run the technical side of the company.
Now, guys, what's been some of the benefits of having some of your board members and some of the management close to the projects, especially considering, well, how COVID restricts some travels, but also having that boots on the ground pretty much year round?
Carl, take it away.
Well, it hasn't really affected us at all. We've been able to operate effectively normally. International travel, effectively, everybody's gotten into the country, no problem with Sven in the Czech. And as said, you can do exploration normally here in Finland. So it hasn't really affected us.
It's been a very advantageous time for us, Cory. Myself and Rich Goldfarb, one of our other consultants, Mary Doherty, were in country for 2 weeks in July. It was essential work. We had a lot of ongoing work happening, and with proper procedures, we were able to enter and work safely, and have done so each year.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So let's get down to the projects. And here you can see a map of most of the sort of gold portions of the Central Lapland Greenstone Belt. You can see in the location here in the upper right, we're in northern Finland there, and you can see that we have a large array of projects highlighted in gold. Now, we've also highlighted further that 4 of these prospects are drill ready. In fact, we've drilled a couple of holes in 3 of these, 2 of the 4, a fair number of holes here at Mustajärvi, and we've just gotten the permit at Sarvi here, which will be our 4th drill-ready prospect. So the idea here is that we own about 800 square kilometers of prospects, some of which are more advanced and at the drill stage, as you can see here. But notice some of our neighbors Of course, shown in green is Rupert's land position with the Ikkari discovery here. Kittila mine is on Agnico Eagle's ground here in the north part of the belt. In blue is Orion, who've been doing a lot of work and have turned up a lot of news at their Risti and Launi discoveries here in the southeast corner. And in general, this fault has historically been the focus of a lot of the exploration in Lapland. It's called the Serka line. It cuts from the upper left to the lower right of the slide, that black line. You'll notice some red little diamonds along that. Those are a lot of the earlier stage or the earlier mines in the district, including the Patavara mine here on Rupert's property on the right-hand side of your slide. But of course, one of the emerging discoveries that we'll be talking about quite a bit in this presentation is the Mustajärvi discovery there in the middle of the screen. And we'll be talking about that one to sort of kick things off as we go forward with the presentation.
Guys, just a little background. Look, this is a well-known area in Finland. It's pretty much all controlled, as you can see here by this map, by really 6 companies, 2 majors, 4 exploration companies. How did you guys get about acquiring such a large land position in this area?
Well, the background is that I've been running a private prospect generator company, Magnus Minerals, in Finland for more than 15 years. And Magnus was active in Lapland, been active 10 years there. And some of our partners have been active there since the late 90s. Lapland was effectively not the sort of major place to look for gold 20 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago. There was only one major deposit, Agnico's Kittila mine. And I think that all the majors, they've been just guessing for the past 17, 19 years, whether there's something non-refractory and something else. Now, as of today, we know. And effectively, Lapland was staked by 2 base metal companies, FQM, First Quantum Minerals, and Anglo American. Anglo made the Sakatti discovery 13 years ago in 2008. So these 2 base metal majors held the ground for roughly 6-7 years. And in the last downturn in late 2014, 2015, the base metal majors started to let go of the ground. It was the 3rd, 4th bear market year. And that's when the juniors came in. That's when S2 Resources came in, staked a lot of ground around Agnico, and Orion was active already in 2015. So we've been following the whole situation, and maybe 30 seconds about the background for FireFox. Patrick and I, we've been good friends for 16 years, and we started to contemplate in 2016 that might be that we're at the bottom of the precious metals bear market, and we're thinking about setting up a company. And the initial target came through Magnus Minerals, but we've been staking ground ever since 2018. We have our own fully owned subsidiary, and we've been staking ground. And I would say that we have a very, very talented and nimble team to stake ground. I'm naturally biased to say, but I would say that we are the best team in staking ground in Finland.
So guys, can you also just provide a bit of an update on some of the other discoveries that are made or that have been made in and around this belt? We just got the news from Rupert Resources this morning in terms of their initial resource, but just what's been happening in the area?
Well, Carl, let me jump in there. As you said, Cory, we've actually bullet pointed it here. Rupert's initial maiden resource at the Ikkari discovery has come in at just under 4 million ounces, contained in 49 million tons, that runs 2.5 grams per ton gold. So bulk mineable widths, near surface, favorable metallurgy, truly Lapland's 2nd multi-million ounce gold deposit. At the north end, of course, Agnico Eagle has the Kittila mine. And that deposit is actually what took me to Finland for my 2nd time in 2005 when I was managing business development for Newmont. Cory, we looked at acquiring the Kittila mine, which at the time was known as the Suurikusako deposit. And that's since grown to a total of almost 9 million ounces of historic resources and production contained. So it's a truly large gold mine, and mining continues there. Other than that, it has been an array of small occurrences, Cory, which stands out in greenstone belts around the world. And one has to wonder, is that going to continue? There wasn't just going to be one or two large gold deposits in a greenstone belt of this size. So, but a lot of these deposits, Cory, like the one shown on the left-hand side of the slide, the red dots there, they were around 100,000 ounces of gold. A lot of the base metals would be just to the east and northeast from this image, where there are sizable copper-nickel deposits, including the giant Sakatti discovery from Anglo-American.
Okay, guys, I'm just moving our images here just so everyone can see these four main prospects that you are going to be drilling. Before we move on from this slide, can you give us a broad overview in terms of the exploration and attack strategy for all four of these?
Carl, go ahead with that.
I didn't hear the end part of the question, but we're going to start drilling in Mustajärvi again on the first week of October. And we're going to hit 3 or 4 of these targets by mid-January. So we're going to drill roughly 1.52 kilometers, possibly at Mustajärvi, and then move over to Sarvi. We're currently doing bottom of till sampling at Sarvi and lining up specific drill targets there. We've done that already in Utsamo. We have at least 2 drill targets there as well. But some of the areas are better when they are fully frozen. We're gonna hit all these properties a second time in the winter, starting in first week of March, April, May again. And we're gonna have a 6 weeks break so that we get all the results in from the first drill program, and can guide the program based on that. So we're effectively hitting these targets twice this winter, and we're going to move the drill 7 times over a period of 8-9 months over there. So there's going to be a lot of drill results coming in. We have simultaneously a bottom of till rig drilling, and during part of the winter we'll have 2 bottom of till rigs drilling. One of them will have also diamond drilling capacity up to 150 meters. It's a sort of robust bottom of till rig, which can also drill diamond drilling to 150 meters. So we'll be having 2 to 3 rigs, one of Cuttis rigs and 2 bottom of till rigs.
Okay, so essentially first pass, get an understanding of these targets, drill some of the targets, and then use those results to follow up in, let's call it a phase 2 program at all 4 of these prospects. Guys, let's move on. Let's actually dive into some of these prospects.
Okay, well, I'm sure some of the audience has actually heard of Mustajärvi, given the news in the last week. It's a gold project there along a paved highway between the cities of Kittilä and Sodankylä. It's 17 kilometers east of Kittilä, and here you see that project. We've got a beautiful, colorful magnetics image here. We also show on this map all the drilling that's been done on the property, as well as a base of till survey, which includes some gold anomalies shown in orange. We own 100% of this project. We've been exploring here since 2018. And as I said, great infrastructure here, the paved highway, the power line you can see just north of the property. And it was an Outokumpu discovery, Outokumpu being the national mining company of Finland. It dates to the 1990s, but they only drilled 12 really shallow holes. We looked at those core samples together, Carl and I, back in 2017, before we launched the company. And they included a number of narrow but high-grade intercepts, 10 to over 20 grams per ton over narrow intervals. They were, in short, at least encouraging. We acquired the property and have drilled it in 2018, 19, 20, and 21. In the early days, we were focusing in the central zone on the property, which you can actually see here with the cluster of our early stage drilling and also the previous Outokumpu drilling, as you can see there, in that part of the property. There, we actually turned up early on a high-grade intercept, 2 meters of 45 grams, real bonanza grade, near surface. It included about 0.6 meters of over 70 grams. So nice intercept. In 2020, we continued to advance. We took a large step out to the northeast and what we call the northeast target here. And even there, we had some base of till anomalies. You could see there's this structure that we've drawn in that transects the property here on this black line. And each time that structure sort of flexes, we found gold. So very encouraging as we've moved along that structure. And then during 2020, we drilled in that zone and we hit an interval of 2 meters of 33 grams per ton. Again, close to surface. We announced that early this year, and we became very encouraged because we'd been able to predict as we stepped out along using the structural model that we could hit more gold, high-grade gold along that trend. And yet, we challenged the team. Let's really challenge our thought process and our targeting process here, because so far these were fairly narrow, albeit high grade, but fairly narrow veins. And we really wanted to see whether this interval would blossom and get thicker or potentially more economic looking intervals. So if we move along to the next slide here, we are looking at, without the magnetics backdrop, you can see the structure more clearly. You can see this sort of cartoon we've drawn to illustrate the dilatant zones where this structure has bent and flexed. And that's apparently where the fluids carrying the gold have risen up. The central zone, the northeast target. And in 2021, we came first back to 150 meters east of where we hit that high-grade interval. We stepped out about 150 meters, and we've hit now 2 150-gram meter holes. So that's grade times thickness, adding up to 150 gram meters or so. And that included a truly bonanza grade interception of 1.35 meters at 94 grams per ton in hole 1. And just this last week, of course, the high grade interval has thickened out now. We have 16.45 meters of 7.69 grams per ton, all in this northeast target here. So clearly we have another zone growing. Talk a little bit about what you see when we hit this gold. These are quartz carbonate tourmaline pyrite veins primarily. The veins include some other minerals like telluride minerals and molybdenum-bearing minerals, but it's in a zone that stretches for kilometers now. We have gold over 2.1 kilometers from an intercept here out to the east target, and along that interval everywhere we go, we've seen a zone of intense albite silica sericide alteration. It is along this structural zone in the footwall of this shear zone here. This would be analogous for those in your audience who are familiar with the Abitibi of being along the Porcupine-Dester Fault or a major transcrustal structure like that. And we have this alteration associated with it, but within that, we're looking for these veins and other more intense alteration that leads to the gold. And as I've already explained, really it was this structural model that we applied three-dimensional modeling using software like Leapfrog and various geophysical tools and geological tools to model the shape of these intercepts in 3 dimensions and start to predict them and focus in. So even after we realized we had bonanza grade here, we stepped out another 650 meters into the east target, and even those holes have hit notable gold for the first drilling in this area here. We'll look a little more.
Over 2 kilometers here, we're seeing 3 different zones or targets: central, northeast, and east. Do you think this is all one big system, or are you thinking that it could be 3 different zones, similar mineralization, but slightly different?
That's a good question, Corey. The mineralization is very similar. Every time we see quartz, carbonate, tourmaline, and pyrite, we're going to see some gold, but sometimes those are narrow intervals. What's probably happening here is that these are pods, Corey, or some people might call them chutes, that are dilatant zones, and within them there's more gold. When we drill between these zones, as we have a couple of times, in this case in hole 11, we didn't hit significant gold, but we did hit alteration and minor veining. So what we believe happens is the system is present, but it's hottest, it's strongest in these zones so far. You'll notice we've sketched in some cross faults here, Corey, one we're quite confident of, and some other skinnier ones we've identified here. We're in the early days. We've only drilled a total of 6,200 meters here, but as we learn, we know this structure is sort of chopped up a little bit, and we're not implying that the mineralization is continuous. However, Corey, it does seem it comes to surface here, and the deepest extents and the highest grade so far is out here in the northeast target. So there is an element of a northeast plunge getting higher grade with depth as we go to the northeast. But it's not going to be continuous. It's probably going to be a bit choppy along there, as we've indicated.
Okay, so then using this map, what's the follow-up drilling going to be? Where approximately are you guys planning on drilling? What other information can you give us in terms of that near-term drilling catalyst?
I'll start here, and then I'll highlight that again on a cross section, Cory. But we've consulted with a number of our technical advisors. Rich Goldfarb and I were in the field here. Quentin Henney and I have discussed this interval in detail. And one of the things you want to do, Cory, when you hit high grade, this high grade, it isn't likely to continue like that for great distances. So you want to step out quite tight. So Carl and the team are designing a program now that will be stepping out quite close around that bonanza grade zone. Maybe we're talking 20-meter type step outs. However, Cory, we will also continue to test this emerging target here, but we'll have these close step outs, and we'll also be drilling deep. Systems in Lapland, all mineral systems that of size in Lapland, such as Sakatti and the Kittilä mine, are known to get very strong, even higher grade at depth. So it's prudent for us to drill a couple of deep holes in here because, let's face it, our best intercept is one of our deepest intercepts in hole 10. And even below that, we hit a couple of more intercepts as well that had considerable grade. Early days, but what you're going to see is deliberate close-in offsets to nail down the geometry of this high-grade sort of lozenge and also test it for greater depth extent.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, guys.
Now, I have to throw a couple of photos in here, and we've also included a table of the most significant intercepts from our last 2 rounds of drilling. And here you see the interval that got things started in the northeast, 2 meters of 33 grams. Hole 1, which we announced, I think, back in June, there's that bonanza grade where we had the visible gold. Just want to point out a couple of core boxes here. This sort of pinkish color, and you can go to our website and see these photos and zoom in a little better for yourselves. But the pinkish color is that albite I was referring to. It's like an envelope outside of the heart of the mineralization. Whereas this black and white, and here you see a zoom in, tourmaline is the black, white and the milky white are the quartz and the carbonate, and then the brassy color, of course, is pyrite. Just in here, a couple of flakes of visible gold in that high-grade interval. So it's these veins within this zone of alteration that we're running the very high grade. Now in hole 10, I'm going to zoom in on this box in a minute, but just from looking at this core box, you can tell it's a little different. Here's the interval we highlighted, 16.45 meters of almost 8 grams per ton. Notice a whole lot of white material here, veins, vein breccias. I kind of call these coalescing veins in earlier presentations. They may well be a breccia of veins, as I'll show you in a moment. But notice the rock's a bit shattered here, quite broken up. And I'll go to the next slide. I'll show you when you zoom in on that box. Look at the bottom of the box here. That is a massive pyrite interval. If you look closely, you can see open space. Very significant. You've seen us and others, the folks at Newfound Gold, a number of other projects have been talking about this type of orogenic gold called epizonal mineralization. That open space is one indication of that. We're probably in the shallower portions of the system. Here you can see some more open space with the pyrite, with the silica, a bit of iron oxide staining. That's the reddish color that you see. All of those things are characteristic of this mineralization. And by the way, if you look through some of the examples of Rupert's mineralization at Ikkari, you'll see some similarities, particularly the presence of these quartz carbonate pyrite veins, the presence of almost massive sulfide intervals. We even had here in this box a little interval of bladed calcite sitting atop the quartz veins here. Again, those are indications that the pressure is a little bit less. You're allowed to form, the system forms some open spaces there, meaning it may well get better to depth. It's certainly still exciting, and we're only at 200 meters below surface here. And I think you can get a feel that the veins, rather than being one vein with that quartz and tourmaline, the black color you see here, sort of lining the vein, you see that the veins are sort of chopped up here, and we see that silica throughout with pyrite sort of throughout this zone. So certainly this interval is more substantial in its thickness, and I just want to go back and highlight it for those of you who are wondering. Out of that 16.4 meters of almost 8 grams, notice it's multiple zones of high and medium grade, 28 grams, 24 grams, 42 grams, 22, 5, 13. So this isn't just one super high grade thing that we've smeared over 16.5 meters. It's multiple events, multiple pulses over that interval. And that's just what we want to see, because if you were underground or in an open pit chasing after something like that, that's a nice consistent shot of ore for your mill someday. And that's why we're happy to see that increased thickness.
So, Patrick, you even mentioned it in terms of newfound gold. Do you see any similarities between this epizonal mineralization from what you guys have drilled and what newfound is drilled?
You know, Cory, we discussed that a little bit with Quentin Henney on our YouTube channel with Crescat Capital the other day. These are, orogenic systems. It's kind of a catch-all term, meaning there are different deposit types, even within Lapland. The mine up at Kittila is a gold arsenic system. Here and at Rupert, these are more enriched in gold, bismuth, and tellurium. So there's differences. However, to your point, there are some similarities in that you have a major through-going structure, a transcrustal fault. And in there are zones that are higher grade, and then there are lower grade disseminated mineralizations about that. The fact that we have shallower types of epizonal occurrences here is consistent with what we heard reported out of Newfound. We also heard about that sort of texture at Fosterville, where Kirkland Lake operates in Australia. So they're certainly different, and the orogenic type of deposit is meant to be, Cory, kind of a big basket, but we're definitely in the same basket, and I would say that there's some similarities certainly across Lapland. We tend to see higher grade in Lapland than a lot of greenstone belts around the world, and that certainly looks like that's the case in Newfoundland as well.
Okay, thank you.
So just wrapping up on the Mustajärvi, we've drawn you a cross section here. So we're looking west. Here's where the cross section is located in our northeast target. There's the highway to get you oriented there, and also the shear zone you can see here. So we're looking west in this cross section. We are at the contact between ultramafic and mafic volcanics on the south side here, with these metasedimentary and volcaniclastic rocks. The whole package is dipping back to the south in this direction, looking at the map view. And at that contact is a major shear zone, that transcrustal shear we call the Mustajärvi shear zone. Here's hole 1 that came through like so. We hit the vein. There's the bonanza grade zone we were talking about that ran over 90 grams per ton. After we saw that veining and even saw visible gold in it, of course, we began to modify the drill program. We expanded the drill program. We drilled hole 6 above it, as you can see, and we drilled 10 about 57 meters away, drilled at a steeper angle also to the northwest. And we have confirmed now a set of veins and vein systems dipping back to the south, semi-parallel to the shear zone. We've posted a number of those intervals here. And of course, most notable was that the high-grade zone itself gets thicker as you go down dip. These veins either coalesce or something is changing in the geometry, or we're getting some sort of cigar or pod shape to it that we haven't quite figured out yet. And so here I'll comment again, Cory. Obviously, one of our strategies will be to test the continuation of the system to depth, which we can do by drilling in this fashion. But we'll also be testing it into the page and out of the page with fairly close offsets. Typically, we'll be drilling to the north again here. But given that we don't exactly know where down was 1.9 billion years ago when this system formed, we may well drill holes in a different direction. We may drill a hole more vertical or even down in this direction to understand the fabric, or whether the thing gets thicker at depth or has a different geometry. But we're going to get a lot of holes into this to really get control. And here I've just highlighted a number of the other characteristics of this system. In general, when one sees pyrite, more pyrite means more gold. As I said, the chemistry is dominated by bismuth and tellurium here, but there's also an important association with molybdenite, which is interesting. We mentioned the bladed calcite. I think I've covered most of this stuff. And just to point out, this vein system appears pretty robust. Hole 2 in this 2021 program hit the zone about 72 meters into the screen that direction, and it appears to be aligned in 3 dimensions with the zone here. Again, it was only a couple of meters of around, I think, 26 grams or so, but this zone has some continuity demonstrated already, and it does seem to be getting better with depth. Note here, we're actually just about 200 meters below surface is the deepest intercept we have on this vein system.
So really, Patrick, this is still early on exploration, early stage discovery drilling too, right?
Absolutely. Carl's driving the team. We're not going to be satisfied with just one discovery, and we're not going to be satisfied maybe with just one high-grade zone at Mustajärvi as well. So we will be testing other targets along this 2 kilometers. But certainly your audience will find follow-up holes close in on the high-grade zone, and you, just like us, can follow along as we see this thing grow and continue and better understand its geometry.
Okay, thank you.
So you might ask yourself, why on earth would a small company like this maintain such a huge portfolio of properties, 800 square kilometers? And how in the heck can they drill 4 projects in a season? Well, we're actually doing that for a reason, folks. And this graphic here summarizes it. We put this together a few years ago. And let me just explain it before we talk to you about the other 3 projects. These are the several greenstone belts around the world we chose to make an example of. Abitibi in Canada, Zimbabwe, Creighton and its namesake of Zimbabwe, of course, and the Norseman Walloona Belt in Western Australia. There's a scale bar. They're similar in size, okay? Look at the graph of gold occurrences. It's radically different. In the Abitibi, 85 million ounces of gold and growing with 40 deposits or so. Western Australia, 75 million ounces and growing with 45 deposits or so. And you'll see the red ink. We've just updated this slide today. There are now 14 deposits known in Lapland with a total of about 13 million ounces in resources, counting Ickery's maiden resource announced today. But rest assured, I've been around a long time, and it's just statistically impossible that the Central Lapland Greenstone Belt will only yield 14 deposits and 13 million ounces. It's just, we know it's a gold-rich setting, we know it's a high-grade setting, and we finally have the money, the investment going into the ground here to make these additional discoveries. And it's for this reason that FireFox is continuing to explore, continuing to hold huge land positions, maybe as much as 20 or 25% of the prospective gold ground in the belt, is that we don't know where the next discovery is coming from. And right now, Mustajärvi is yielding 100 gram meter holes, which is fantastic, but it's no Ickery just yet. And we've got projects right next to Ickery and right next to other discoveries in the belt that need drilling. And we're not putting the blinders on and ignoring those.
Patrick, real quick, why is this greenstone belt so underexplored then, if there already is this many million ounces in resources in such a short period of time?
Yep, great point, Cory. As Carl alluded earlier with the Anglo-American discovery at Sakatti and First Quantum's work, and prior to that, another copper-nickel discovery or 2. Really, it was a base metal province, Cory. So Outokumpu, the Geological Survey of Finland, they explored here, really good geologists and explorers, but they were focused on base metals. And really, the Suurakuusikko discovery was clearly something different. That happened in the 90s, so still quite modest. It happened in a road cut discovery, as a matter of fact, and it was small for a while and then grew to what it is today. So now, I was there in 2005 with Newmont, and I couldn't believe my eyes. There was a total of 300,000 meters of drilling for gold in its history, Cory, and I was at Newmont at the time, and we drilled that every year in Nevada. So this is a belt that needs a lot more drilling for gold, and it's finally getting it. It had to sort of demonstrate itself. Is it a greenstone belt that just doesn't have gold in it? Well, the answer is a resounding no. It does have gold, and it has high-grade gold, and we believe it has a lot more of it. But it would be like being in Timmins maybe 80 years ago or something. Certainly there's a few gold mines there, but the future was going to be bright then, and it's going to be bright here in Lapland.
All right, before we move on to the other prospects, just a quick question regarding how much it costs to hold this large of a land package in Finland. There has been some comments that it's expensive to hold these projects, so you really do need to isolate sooner rather than later. What insights can you give us here?
Take it away, Carl.
Well, there's 3 kinds of tenements in Finland. You have a reservation, which is very inexpensive, lasts for 2 years. And then you file for an exploration permit, and depending on how long the authorities process it, it could be anywhere currently between 1.5 years up to a few years. And when it gets granted, you pay 20 euros per hectare to landowners. That's actually one of the major differences between Finland and Sweden and Norway. In Finland, the landowners get the compensation, so that's why I would say more than 98% of landowners are very favorable towards exploration. But we've effectively built a conveyor belt. We've had a number of reservations and still have a number of reservations, which we staked, some of them last year, some even this year. But effectively, it takes time for the authorities to process the application. So if you plan this correctly, you can effectively have a conveyor belt of project, and you don't need to pay €1 million of landowner payments each year. Our landowner payments are below 200,000 for this year. They'll go gradually up, but you don't need to stake everything, because we know that the tenements will be granted when the time comes.
Okay, makes sense. Guys, thank you. Let's move on.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those other prospects that are going to see drilling. And here we're looking at our large Yesio project outlined in black. There's a scale bar for you there in the upper right. So this is a sizable property. And really, we have two drill-ready prospects in this slide. So we're going to talk briefly about Utsamo here in the north, on which we're fully permitted and have already drilled a few holes. And then we're going to talk about the Kataja belt down in the south, where we have just drilled the first 3 holes because we had surface landowner permission to do so. This permit, however, will very likely be issued before the end of the calendar year. So in that sense, it's drill ready, but we don't quite have the permit yet. So this is the large Yesio property. A few things to point out. You'll notice the Serka shear passing from the upper left, sort of bending through the Utsamo target and dropping down to the sort of lower right. And this is, of course, an area that was put on the map with Orion's boulder discovery up at Risti, right at the top of the slide. And then they've also been drilling and recently announced some more anomalies in the Launi East area over in lower right. So we're kind of intertwined here with Orion. Significantly, the reason this project's advanced a little slower is in the north, where that Serka shear passes through and where you can see these trends from Rupert's ground may well come through our ground. That's all swamp in that area. So as a result, one has to do some sort of sampling to explore through that swamp. We do geophysics, and we did like this area after doing geophysics, but we also run a large base of till sampling program in the Utsamo target to help explore through that swamp. And that's the same methodology that Rupert used to discover Ikkari. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. At Kataja in the south, where we have the paved highway adjoining the property, all those orange circles there are quartz and outcrop samples, boulders and outcrop that have yielded up to 10 grams per ton at surface, as we do have some outcrop in that area and much thinner cover, and hence you explore it a little differently, and you're likely to be drilling there a little quicker, as we've just done at the Kataja area. So if we go to the next slide, we've zoomed in on the north, that Utsamo prospect, and again, we're showing you magnetics here, and the warm colors would be magnetic rocks, maybe mafic volcanics or mafic intrusive rocks like gabbros. And you'll notice they're probably folded here. We've drawn in some fold axes that they sort of curve around each other, these black lines. We're talking about this area right up in here, where you can see that we've designed a base of till sampling program like so, the little gold circles. And that's where we've gone off and actually drilled through the glacial sediments. There might be 20 or 30 meters of cover. In the cases of deep overburden, we get a sample at the base of that. Tells us a little bit about the rocks there and also whether there's gold or pathfinder elements in the system. The setting here has been shown to host gold down at Launi. These often sedimentary rocks and volcanic rocks together that are chopped up with this major fault and cross structures. And really it's about tracking these anomalies through that overburden, and that helps you generate the drill targets. So as Carl said earlier, we've been doing bot sampling here through last winter and much of 2021. We've just generated those anomalies, and we're sort of preparing to issue press releases on those targets here probably in the next month. And this is an area that'll be drilled quite soon. And
now, are you guys expecting high grade? Is it going to be similar to what you've seen at Mustajärvi so far? Is high grade, even bonanza grade?
Well, let me tell you about expectations, Corey. If you look inside this circle I just drew, you can see 3 big circles there, some anomalies, and a few arrows if you look closely. And in actual fact, we did drill 3 holes there. And this is when we had no money. and we had a magnetic anomaly there, and we knew this big structure, the Serco zone, came through somewhere. We drilled it, and really, there were geologists in our core shed from another company. They saw the core. They literally high-fived, Carl and the team and said, "You've hit it. Can't wait to see the assays." Well, it was a fault, all right, but that particular one had no gold in it. So expectations often go unfulfilled. However, you're on the major break, Cory, and the major break at Serca has hosted previously fairly high-grade but small systems. However, Ikkari is on a splay of the Serca break, and it's a large, higher-grade system. And, of course, Mustajärvi is on a similar major break, and it's hosting high grades. So we do see the same chemistry, Cory, bismuth tellurium with the gold anomalies. And our hopes are here that given the perfect structural setting and the right host rocks, there's potential for a large, more bulk style of mineralization here, but we just don't know yet until we drill it.
Fair.
So let's drop to the south about 9 kilometers down to what we call the Katja Belt here. The permit outline is shown in that sort of gold line, and I put a red square, red rectangle around the site of our prospect at the southern end. And this is because this was a news release just a few weeks ago. There'd been no drilling in this area, even though Outokumpu in the 90s had generated some anomalies. They never followed them up. In 2019, our last campaign of the season found 6.4 grams per ton gold in outcrop along this hillside here and in boulders. We were quite encouraged by that. So we began doing more exploration here. We then flew drone-based magnetics. Again, you see a similar thing, Cory. We see this warm color, magnetic rocks, probably mafic volcanics, punctuated by these areas of blue and green where the magnetite has been destroyed. And these are probably big faults like the D3 or the third deformation event faults that often host the gold. Cross structures here that are associated with gold and outcrop can be very exciting. And we had a few 2.5 gram samples down here right near the highway. And the local landowner gave us permission, and we went in and drilled there. And the first drilling of any kind in this area hit 2 of the 3 holes hit some gold, including 4 meters of 2 grams, 2 meters of 13 grams within that, less than 20 meters below surface. So really a fantastic success given there's no drilling at all here, and we weren't even on our best part of the anomaly, which are on the major structures here with the higher grade rock chips. Again, 2 kilometers away where Orion has done some drilling at Launi, they've found some fairly narrow but high grade gold there in that drilling and in their trenches. So quite encouraged by the early days here at the Katja Belt. This permit has been through its hearing process, and we've been notified that the granting is highly likely to be very soon. So that's second and third drill-ready prospects that'll see the drill bit here in sort of November, December timeframe.
Okay, so still this year. And do you have a drill rig already locked up? I know drill rigs are hard to get right now with all the drilling that's been going on.
Yeah, Carl can. It looks like he might have dropped off, but Carl can.
I'm online, but the video dropped off.
Yeah. Carl, comment about that.
There's effectively 2 bottlenecks in Finland. Currently, permits is one. Up to last summer, to the summer of 2020, it took 6 to 9 months to have a permit. Now it takes up to a year and a half. It's boom time in Finland regarding exploration, and the mining authority hired a 7th person, but they are fully swamped. The other thing is that drill rigs, there's only 34 drill rigs in whole of Finland. 7 years ago there were, depending on, there was 4 major companies 7 years ago. Now there's 10. There's 2 dozen juniors. There's only 34 surface drill rigs. The 2 biggest drilling companies are Kati and ADC. They have 13 and 12 rigs and 2 very small ones. I've known all the CEOs. I've said to them many years that you need to build more rigs. 1 per year is not sort of aggressive organic growth. We are very well prepared. We have a drill rig for this decade. And 2 years ago when I reserved a rig for the decade, Kati was thinking that was partially a joke, but I sort of said that please make sure that you have it in your database. The database only goes 2.5 years into the future, but we have a rig for the decade. But it will be a problem when somebody makes a major discovery, when somebody makes another Ikkari kind of discovery. What happened effectively was that since Ikkari was discovered 1.5 years ago, ADC's rigs are tied up there. So if you want to drill in Finland, in Lapland, all the rigs for each and every week are taken up for the following 730 days. So it's impossible to get a rig. At some point, might be that a Canadian company will come in here and so, but that hasn't happened yet. But we have a rig for the rest of the decade. If we make a major discovery, it might be difficult to get 4 or 6 rigs to the side, but Kati is the only, Kati's been established more than 40 years ago, the best drilling company in Finland. The guys are in the second generation running the company now. They are my age, and we are the only listed company they've invested into. So they have more than 2 million shares of FireFox. They drilled all the major mines in Finland. They drilled Agnico's Kittilä mine. They drilled Sakatti. They've been in the business for 1.5 generations. And now this second generation, I assume that they also wanna be involved on the equity side. So Kati's been a shareholder roughly for 2 years now. And I think that if and when we make something, a major discovery and want to have more drill rigs on the side, I think that we have a good position to have more rigs, but nothing is certain.
Okay. So yeah, but at least you have that one tied up for the decade, right? So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're firm for early October, and I will say this: we won't go into it, but Carl and I are both pretty entrepreneurial folks. So Carl saw this problem coming very early, and we're putting a lot of brain power to work on how best to manage it, because we pay an excellent rate and they deliver the product. So you wouldn't want to rock the boat very much. You just want to make sure that you have quality drill rigs when you need them.
Got it. Absolutely. Okay. Thanks, guys.
So let's just move forward a little bit to a different area where a very high profile permit has just been granted for FireFox. And again, you see a lot of gold here. These are huge properties. We're really going to talk in detail only about Sarvi at the sort of lower center of the slide there, right next to the Ikkari discovery. But look at all this other large properties. In the west, we have Monto, which adjoins Agnico Eagle property in the north, has a little bit of historic drilling and some high-grade sampling. We have Parto here, which joins Agnico on the east side. That's sort of in the center top of the slide. And then if you look at the lower right, we have this huge Kolho project and a number of other small projects that link together Sarvi and Kula with really everything north of Rupert blocked out in FireFox's colors. So this gives us the option, Cory, of practicing that second business model. With all this acreage, of course, we would consider joint ventures with a big brother or a major partner on some of these non-core assets. But at Sarvi, at Yesio, which we just spoke about, at Mustajärvi, these are 100% on projects that we're advancing and drilling on our own. But it gives us the optionality of leveraging off of partnerships to spend even more into the ground to give us a higher probability of success around the belt. So we have had JV discussions around some of these other properties, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. But let's just zoom in down here at the south and talk about Sarvi as we wrap up. So I've zoomed in now so you can see our Sarvi permit immediately to the north of Area 1 outlined in green. The white arrow reports to the one of the several prospects where Rupert has hit gold, but of course the one with the resource at Ikkari. And you can see that we've just granted permits at Sarvi and Leto further north, and that's sort of the anchor for these properties. As Carl said, a number of these are reservations where you can hold a large area at low cost. It's very low holding cost for a reservation. It gives you 2 years exclusivity. And several of these are already in the permit application phase, which may take a little while, but that gives you the exclusive path to get your permit. And with the permits come the ability for mechanized exploration as we are commencing at Sarvi. We've already commenced trenching on the west side of the property. And as we zoom in, you'll see the sort of targets we are chasing. In general, the lay of the land is here. Most of the Area 1 and south of us here and Ickery is about 4.5 kilometers away from our property boundary. They've drilled to within 1.7 kilometers of our property boundary here. A lot of that area is a bit swampy, and that swamp comes up onto the southern half of the Sarvi property. And then there's higher ground as you go to the north on the rest of the Sarvi project.
Now, what about some of the similarities to what Rupert has over at Ickery?
Yeah, that's perfect timing, Cory. You must have anticipated your sixth sense that I was changing slides. So what I've done here is zoomed in on Ickery where we can do a bit of comparison. Of course, Ickery sits on one of these major east-west structures. You see it highlighted there in red. So Ickery is down here, and you can see it sits on one of those east-west structures there. Which are obviously important, but there are cross-cutting structures that are younger. There may be the D3 or D4 events. They can be northeast or northwest oriented. This interpretation comes first from magnetics. Before you've drilled into the rocks, you don't really know these things, so you sort of interpret it. So we've seen that in Rupert's presentation and news release. The thing has a northeast orientation to it. It plunges off to the northeast, similar to our Mustajärvi discovery. But as we shift up to the north onto the Sarvi property here, you can see some similar settings in the south here. You can see east-west thrust faults and major structures. Those saw teeth tell you that it's a thrust fault. And then intersecting that with northwesters or northeasters, you see cool colors. Those are probably mafic volcanics in the warm colors, and the cool colors are either lithologic contacts or areas where alteration has destroyed the magnetite, or perhaps both. And it's that sort of setting that they were prospecting at Ickery, and we believe we have a similar setting at Sarvi. The trend is, you'd have to say, is northeast-southwest from Ickery, but maybe we have a similar northeast-southwest trend here, and we all know that B2 is exploring on the Orion Joint Venture back over here to our southwest. So there is some trendology going on here for sure. What we've done at Sarvi is flown detailed airborne magnetics with a drone, which is what you see here. And we've also done ground magnetics to fill in at even tighter detail. We do that with our own teams at quite low cost. And you can see there are some till anomalies in yellow that's showing a few gold anomalies. There's also in sort of I think that's sort of a purple color. There's some arsenic anomalies on the west side of the property over here from till and rock sampling. And there's one rock sample in an area we call Bog Island as the outcrop sticks up out of the swamp here, where we got about 1.5 grams per ton gold. So there's gold indicated on the property. We had previous historic drilling out to the west side, where the Geological Survey of Finland drilled a narrow interval of 3.5 grams per ton. And other than that, Cory, we see gold, arsenic, and bismuth anomalies in till. See a bit of copper kicking around in some of the rock chip samples. So we think we have the right major lithology, mafic volcanics in contact with sediments. We also have an important graphite tuff or graphite schist unit that is present at Ickery and also occurs up at the Kittilä mine. Very important. So we have the right setting here. It's just no drilling. And in fact, the southern half of the property covered by those glacial sediments again, Cory. So we've got to get out there, begin the base of till sampling, which, as Carl said, we've already done. And just for scale, Cory, we actually include an outline in the upper left here of the surface workings of the Kittilä mine and their facilities at Agnico Eagle, just for scale. So folks can see these are large properties in here, and there's ample room to fit a major million-ounce deposit, as we've just seen down at Ickery. So this is great country to be in, brilliant road access here. We were just on the ground here in July looking at the areas that will soon be trenched and drilled at Sarvi. So the rig here, Carl, will arrive in November most likely, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, so good stuff at Sarvi. And believe it or not, this is a property that people have already learned the name of, only because of meteorology, obviously. As we actually had this property before Ickery had announced the discovery, but we fast-tracked it as a permit, of course, as Rupert got busy, and the permit has now been granted.
Yeah, fair enough. That Rupert story has been a great one, and investors have made money on that. Just to let everybody know that a recording will be made available of this webinar. I see a couple of questions have come in on that. Don't worry, that recording will be made available shortly after, probably in the next day or two.
Okay, and just wrapping up, we like to give a timeline, and people can think about catalysts. And just to show you what's happened, 2021 has been a pivotal year for FireFox as the Mustajärvi program. Really, we've had 2 programs completed and announced during 2021. 250 gram meter holes out of the most recent one. And that leads, of course, to Q4, where the drill rig shows up again at Mustajärvi. We mentioned the Sarvi prospect, where mechanized exploration can begin. And there you can see Sarvi on track for drilling also in Q4. And down at the bottom here, the large Yesio project with bot sampling, the first recon drilling at the site of our prospect, which actually hit, led us to, of course, bot anomalies coming up for Q4 drilling as well at the Yesio project, which was also one of our listing properties with Mustajärvi. And in the middle there, we haven't spoken much about it, but we've done a couple of targeting exercises now with the Gold Spot Discoveries team using their machine learning and AI technology to help process these huge data packages that we have on these huge properties. And we are working with Gold Spot again. Sven's just queued that work up to get underway. And I should point out that the Gold Spot team was very helpful in helping to generate the last round of targets at Mustajärvi. I think human beings did most of the work, Cory, but their computers helped out a bit. So right here, Q4, kind of perfect timing, really, when one can start exploring, come off of good news and go right into a fully funded drill program without the need for the company to raise cash to bring a drill rig back. And we've got a drill rig showing up in October for sure. And Carl continues to assure Kati that we really do want a rig for the rest of the decade as well. So,
couple follow-up questions there, Patrick. You answered the Gold Spot question. Are you guys still working with Gold Spot to continue to isolate some targets?
That's right. In fact, we're just kicking off. After the financing closed in the summer, we were so busy at Mustajärvi, and Sven was doing so much work on targeting there that we wanted to wait until we had gotten through the most of that Mustajärvi program. And really, it's just kicking off now. And remember, we've only talked about 4 of the sort of 12 prospects and projects that we have in the company. And some of them are huge areas with only early stage work, perhaps ideally suited for that kind of targeting.
Now, final question. There's a lot of work going on here. There's a lot of drilling that's going to happen. What is your guys' projected cash burn? What's the budget for the overall program? Just remind everybody kind of the runway with the money that you guys have.
Carl, you want to handle that?
We have roughly $4.5 million budget for this year, maybe 20% higher for next year. We have $7 million in warrants, which are all exercisable within the next 19 months. All are in the money currently. So we don't need any financing with high likelihood, maybe even for a couple of years. It's just about execution, and as Patrick said, we have 4 projects currently. Gold Spot is doing half of the work on these current projects, half of the work on projects 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we have a conveyor belt of projects, and it's just about execution, season in, season out.
Okay, guys, we're pretty much at an hour here, so take us home here, Patrick.
Yeah, just wrapping up. Again, pre-discovery valuation. Our little company's been around for 4 years now, and we've become one of the fastest movers. We've become one of the most well-known for drilling. We drill every year. If we have more money, we drill more. If we have less money, we drilled less in the past. But we've really executed. We built a team up that merges young, strong backs and high energy levels with some senior experience, both in Finland and overseas. And we brought in institutional investors to support us, important team members indeed. And this large land position of 800 square kilometers has already yielded some very exciting high grade at Mustajärvi, more holes to come. And as you can see, a full conveyor belt with lots of opportunity.
All right, guys, we'll wrap it up here again. If you guys want to reach out to the company, there is contact information right in front of you. If you want any more questions addressed, you can always email me, fleck@kereport.com. I'll have Patrick and Carl back on the show to update on the back of news and also answer any of your questions. Guys, I appreciate your time. Very good presentation. Everyone who tuned in, thank you. Thank you for everyone sending in your questions. And I think we all wish you guys the most success in this upcoming drilling that sounds like it's going to continue through the rest of this year.
Thanks very much. Great to be here. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.